Alright, I want to talk a little bit about chaos magic. So, for me, within my craft, when I started practicing a lot of witchcraft, one of the sources that I learned about chaos magic from, and like many of the sources that I'm getting things from, I have very mixed opinions and mixed feelings about this source. But one of my introductory sources, if not the introductory source to me to chaos magic, was the Psychonauts Field Manual. I don't at this time remember who that's by, but it is a free PDF that anyone can read online. And although I do personally disagree with some of the things that the text says, to be fair, I disagree with what most of my favorite sources on various different occult beliefs say to some extent. I take what speaks to me and leave what does not. It's just the type of person I am. That's part of why chaos magic appeals to me in the first place. But one of my introductory sources to chaos magic was the Psychonauts Field Manual. And I still really love a lot of what that text does, because it gives a map and it gives a starting point and it gives a sort of very condensed overview of many different occult topics, and essentially provides someone with, here are these different things that are out there that you can learn about. If you want to learn more than what is here, now you know what these things are called, so you can research them and go and learn about those things. And I think that that was really helpful for me earlier on. I think that now I've sort of outgrown that text, but for when I read it, it was very helpful for me at that time as an introduction to modern occult arts. And I think that for me, as someone who came from a half Christian, half atheist upbringing, that when I started practicing chaos magic, at that time, I was sort of agnostic, because my first ever truly significant spiritual encounter that was conscious, where I was like summoning another spirit, or summoning a spirit, was, in my case, I was learning witchcraft from my sister. I was 20. We summoned Jenny together. And that was the event that turned me from atheist to agnostic. I had been raised from being deconverted from Christianity in childhood up until 20. I was raised anti-theist for about at least 10 years. And summoning a Jinni is the thing that made me agnostic, meaning I no longer knew what was real. Atheism is not believing in any sort of like spirits or gods or deities. However, there is variation within that. I've met atheists who do believe in ghosts and certain things, and some people would say those people aren't atheists. When I was an anti-theist, that is saying not only do you not believe in like gods or spirits, but anti-theists believe that it's immoral to believe in any form of theism, and they essentially compare all forms of theism to monotheism and to Christianity, and they say that all of it is wrong and all of it is traps and binds. And I was taught to believe that. And when I summoned a Jinni with my sister at 20, that was what made me agnostic, because after experiencing that, I no longer knew what was real. And I say agnostic because that was a state of unknowing, of suddenly something had happened to me that essentially shattered everything I thought was real up until that point. Having been raised in such a way where I was taught to believe that material existence is all that there is, I was taught to believe that thoughts and that the mind and mental stuff is an extension of, or is just physically happening in your brain. Like, so it's just chemicals in your brain. So I was taught to believe that everything that exists has like a physicality to it, that nothing can exist that is not essentially physical, was materialism. I was taught materialism as opposed to idealism. And materialism is focusing on material physical existence, whereas idealism is focusing on ideas. And yeah, so when I became agnostic at 20, I started practicing chaos magic, I started delving headfirst, recklessly and without abandon, into anything and everything that I could find on the occult, with varying degrees of success and varying degrees of some of the things I was exposed to and learned about I kind of wish I hadn't. For example, I fell prey to New Age ideologies that I don't disagree with all of New Age, but the form of it that I had gotten roped in with was highly destructive and damaging to my life, and definitely, in my opinion, was a cult. I fell for the cult of the Aten as well. I was in a revitalization of the first ever monotheistic religion, where me and some other people, like at the time it was like 5 people, were trying to like create a commune, and I was in really bad. I'll put it that way. I was in very deep and very bad, and I didn't realize how bad it really was till I was out of it. But I fell into a sun-worshipping cult. By that point, I was already, like, very much theistic, but I was sort of more just, like, omnist, but also still theistic Satanist by that point as well. And essentially, I think I'm starting to lose the plot with this video. What I will say is, for me as a chaos magician, I don't believe mind and spirit are separate things. I believe mind is an extension of spirit. Or, at the very least, I believe mind is heavily connected to spirit or overlapping with spirit. So I define spirit in such a way where I don't really believe that, like, mind is a fully separate thing from spirit. And this helps me as a chaos mage, but it also helps me to kind of explain my approach to theism as someone who came from a mixed half Christian, half atheist background, where the entirety of my teen years was spent as an atheist and as an anti-theist. I feel that for me now, having turned into very much a firm theist and an omnist and a theistic Satanist and a chaos sorcerer, or coyote. I like to call us coyotes. I don't know. I think it's funny. But, I know that's not what it's called. They call it KO, but I think it's funnier to say coyote or coyote. But yeah, I think that, mind and spirit are not really separate things to me. And part of this is because I have dissociative identity disorder. I have literally multiple minds in one body. And the kinds of anti-theists that I was raised around, they would tell me things like, well, I don't believe that, like, and this is before I knew that I was DID system, so when I was still masking as a singlet, but they would say things like, well, I don't believe that DID is possible. I don't believe that someone having multiple personalities is possible, because that would imply that there can be multiple people in one body, and that contradicts my views of atheism. And I was not just told this by one atheist either. I was told this by multiple anti-theists, that the existence of DID, what was formerly called multiple personality disorders in the 90s, I was told that this contradicts anti-theism. And I was told, by extension, that my innate existence goes against the form of atheism I was raised under. And this is not a coincidence. This is because the form of anti-theism that I was raised under, and personally I believe anti-theism in general, is tied in with white supremacy, is tied in with alt-right, sort of totalitarian, might makes right, just pay attention to the white science and what you're told is true, but don't dig beneath the surface on any of these things. Don't study any of these things for yourself. Just, like, ignore anything that contradicts this very Eurocentric and patriarchal view of science and the world. And because I was taught that having DID goes against that, when I became a theist, and when my own personalities or alters presented themselves in our DID system, in our brain, as spirits, like, we can't help that. That's literally just how our brain represents itself to ourselves. As someone living with multiple personalities and living with dissociative identity disorder, I realized that actually I agree. I agree with the anti-theists who told me that if multiple personalities or DID is real, that contradicts anti-theism. I actually agree with that. I do think it contradicts anti-theism, or at the very least it contradicts the form of it that I was raised under, which is exactly why I'm not an anti-theist anymore, because there was so much ableism and bullshit tied in with it, where they act like they're so much better than these Christian nationalists or whatever, while they're still excluding and harming people. And I realized I don't want any part in that. And so for me, mind is spirit. And I have multiple minds in one body because of the disability I have, which means I have multiple spirits by my own definition. And living like that is not something a lot of people understand, but it's also further complicated by the fact that in my own DID system, my alternate personalities, my alters do see ourselves as spirits. We do present in our headspace, in our brain, in our internal world as spirits. And so to tell us that we're not, or that we don't exist, or that whatever, it's like we've already been told that our whole life. We do exist. I exist. So if my faith is me, if my gods, my spirits, whatever, are literally a part of me in my brain, you can't tell me they don't exist because they're a part of me. So, like, that's kind of where I'm at with that. And I think that this will make sense to the kind of people it's meant for, and this is not going to make sense to the kind of people it's not meant for.